BookTube world. It's Dave back again. One of the things I wanted to talk about this right from the very beginning. I wanted to talk about how I try to remember more of what I read. I remember years ago reading books and putting them down, and then somebody would ask me about the book like a day or two later, and it was really hard for me to recall what I had read. Just read it and liked it, and I still didn't remember it. So I decided to, watch a lot of videos here on BookTube to see what other people did, and a lot of people have advice for how to remember. And I've sort of adapted some of the suggestions others have made, added a few, and just modified some things so it works for me. And I have found since I do this, even though it does take a little conscious effort, I tend to remember a lot more of what I read. Now, do I remember every book I read in great detail? Nope, don't. But I find that by doing these steps, what I'm reading becomes more important to me. And when it becomes more important to me, well, I think that is a helpful way of remembering things. Now, everybody does it a little bit different. You might have some other ideas, in which case I'd like to know, how you do it, how you remember more, because isn't that the goal? I mean, if you're reading fiction, you want to remember, which book was great and why it was great, but it's not like you're remembering quotes necessarily. I don't know. I don't read fiction, but I do know that nonfiction, for me, one of the reasons I read is to learn. I say I'm a lifelong learner, and books are a primary way in which I learn. So that's why it's important for me to remember more. So the first thing, I write in my books. I know that's sacrilege to some people, but the hard books that I read, the paper books that I read, I'm not afraid to mark them up. I know, now obviously I don't read, super rare books, super expensive books. But if I read a book, I'll tend to buy a book if it's something that I know I'm really going to like or, refer back to in the future. Otherwise, I tend to be a Kindle person. I'll talk about that too. But in the case of paper books, I highlight the things that I want to remember. I use little symbols too, by the way. If it's something that I just want to remember, I'll highlight or underline it depending on what tool I have at my disposal. I don't always have a highlighter with me, but I almost always have a pen with me. So I'm not afraid of noting things that I think are important that I want to remember. If it's a word that I don't know, I'll circle the word, put a question mark. Same thing with anything else that I read that I don't quite understand. I'll put a question mark in the margin. So later when I go back through the book, I can take some time and look up those elements. These little marks tend to jump out at me later on after I'm done reading the book. I found that, some books I do a lot more work in. I underline more, I make more notes in the margin, or I make my little symbols in the margin. The books that I'm primarily reading for enjoyment, I probably don't have a lot of notes in there. If I want to make sure that I share, I want to share something with others, I'll maybe make some more detailed notes in the margin about what they are and why I want to share them. But if it's something I really want to remember, I tend to pay extra attention and make little notes in the margin. If it is a Kindle book, then it's pretty much the same thing. I can highlight there. An advantage of Kindle, of course, is I can look up a word almost right away as long as I'm on an internet connection. That's very helpful. And I can even make notes. They allow you to type in notes. Now, some people don't like this. Some people don't believe that that's an effective way of doing things. I happen to think it works even on Kindle. no matter what platform I'm on, I make sure that I don't, go crazy. I mean, some people just, start highlighting everything, and then you open up their book and virtually everything is highlighted. I don't like to do that. Just making highlights of the things that resonate with me. I also like to keep a notepad with me or a notebook with me where I can write longer thoughts about what I'm reading as I go along. I think that helps me retain things because I'm not transcribing things from the book. I'm writing observations on my notebook, in my notebook, that I want to remember later. Sometimes if I'm near a computer screen, I'll do it, on a computer screen, but it helps me again begin to process what I'm reading, and my notes generally are reflective of not word by word what's in the book, but what that passage means to me or why it's important to me. I also keep in that notebook, I also keep a personal dictionary. So terms, phrases that I want to remember or look up, I might make a note of those as well. When I finish a chapter, I like to, again, in my notebook or online, I like to make a little chapter summary, maybe just a few lines or a paragraph. But I want to, again, capture the main ideas, putting it into my own words. And I do that, in my notebook or whether it's print or online. I'll tell you a little bit more about that some other time. When I am done reading a book, I'm a book nerd, I kind of do a book report. When I finish a book, not right away, not the same day, maybe not even the next day, but eventually, within about 2 or 3 days, I go back to my notes and I write a summary. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 paragraphs. Sometimes if the book is, just full of things I really want to remember, the book review might be longer. So I will write that to myself. I might share that with people. I could start sharing them here because they're all stored in Evernote. I could share them as part of what I do here on BookTube. But I like to write a summary of the book in my own words again. And then I do a thing, I've been doing this forever. 5 things I want to remember. And again, I refer back to my notes, and then I just write down 5 things that I want to remember, much of which comes from the summary, but these are kind of narrow it down. The next thing I do is I transfer, let's say out of Kindle, the quotes that I will really want to remember, and I put them in my book summary. I don't want to call it a book report. I put them in my book summary. So for every book I read, I have a note. It's in Evernote, but you can do this in a notebook too. And I have a review or I have a summary of every book I read. And from time to time, it's very helpful for me to go back. Like let's say, for example, I'm reading something about how the brain works and I see something in an article in Scientific American and it jogs my memory. Wait, I remember reading something about that. Well, I can just go back and I can do a sort and find that information. So that's why I like to do that. I also keep a reading log. Again, book nerd here. I keep a log of everything that I read. I just put down the date I read it, the name of the book, the author, how many pages, and then a link to the book summary that I have written. But I have one more thing that is very important to me. After I've read the book, after I've done the summary, again, like not the same day, but a few days later, I try to tell somebody about the book. My wife and I like to go for walks at night, and we walk around the neighborhood. It's very nice, but a lot of times it's at night and it gets dark and you can't see anything. So we talk about our day. We talk about things that we've seen or talked to people about. And I like to tell her about the books I read, and that is really important to me. And by the way, she is just an angel for listening to some of this stuff, because I guarantee you some of what I read she has no interest in. But it's very important for me to tell people what I read. And it's not like I walk up to strangers on the street and say, hey, you want to know about this book I read? No, but like, again, I tell my wife, or if I'm in conversation with someone and a topic comes up, I try to, offer some information about what I read. The simple fact of teaching that to someone or telling somebody about what you've read and the concepts that you've learned really plant it into my brain. So that's how I do it. And this is a system I've been using for a long time, works for me. If you have any other ideas, I'd love to hear about them. Post a comment below or send me an email. I'd love to hear from you and learn from you, and maybe I'll share other tips that you've posted in future videos. So thank you very much for tuning in. You know the old routine: hit like, hit subscribe, all those kind of good things, and we will talk soon.